cold air. 4:40 in the morning and the range is empty except for her breath fogging out in front of the rifle scope. Vivi doesn't need the light yet. She knows this position by feel. Elbows locked into the mat, cheek welled against the stock, cold metal kissing her jaw like it's done 10,000 times before. Because it has. 10,000 mornings just like this one. Alone, before the sun, before anyone's awake to ask her why a 28-year-old woman spends her Saturdays face down in the dirt at a private range outside Fayetteville, instead of sleeping in like a normal person. Except she's not normal. She knows that. She's known it since she was 7 years old and her father put a .22 in her hands and told her to breathe out slow. The wind flag 50 yards downrange snaps once. Twitches. Settles. She exhales. Half a breath. Holds it right there in the gap between heartbeats, the place her father used to call the pocket. Squeeze. Not pull. Never pull. The shot cracks the silence apart. Steel rings 1,000 yards out. A perfect, singing ring that means dead center, means she didn't even need to check, means some part of her body still remembers exactly what it was trained to do even after 3 years of trying to forget it. A young man 2 lanes over turns his head. Stares. Because nobody hits steel at 1,000 yards before sunrise with an off-the-shelf Remington and iron nerves. Nobody except her. She doesn't turn to look at him. She racks the bolt, chambers another round. Because if she looks at him, if she lets herself see the way his face just changed, she'll have to explain something she's spent years trying not to explain. So she doesn't. She just shoots again. And the steel rings again and again, until the kid packs up his gear early, murmuring something to his buddy that sounds a lot like "Who is that?" and Vivi keeps her eye on the scope like the world outside that circle of glass doesn't exist, like it never did. There's a peace in this. A strange borrowed peace, the kind she doesn't get anywhere else anymore. Not in a church pew. Not in the quiet of her own kitchen at midnight. Only here, flat on cold ground, breath synced to a rhythm that was beaten into her before she was old enough to understand what it would cost her. Because it did cost her. Everything. Some nights it feels like. A father who looks at her like a stranger. A brother who barely remembers who she used to be before she disappeared into a version of herself nobody in this family was ever allowed to meet. A mother who isn't here to referee any of it, who's been gone so long now that Vivi sometimes has to work to remember the exact sound of her laugh, instead of just the fact that she used to laugh at all. The range attendant flips the lights on at 6 sharp, humming to himself, oblivious. Vivi packs up quiet, case latched. Rifle broken down into its foam cutouts with the same care a jeweler might use setting a stone. The drive home takes 11 minutes. She could do it with her eyes closed past the gas station with the flickering sign, past the church with the marquee that still reads, "God bless our troops" in peeling white letters, past the turn that leads toward Fort Bragg, where the flag still goes up every morning, at the same exact second, whether anybody's watching or not. Some habits outlive the reasons for them. She thinks about that a lot lately. Habits and reasons, and how far apart the two can drift without a person even noticing. Her house sits at the end of a gravel drive. Small, quiet, the kind of place people drive past without noticing, which is exactly the point. She picked it for that reason and no other. 3 bedrooms she doesn't use. A kitchen too big for one person's coffee mug. A porch swing that's never once had 2 people sitting on it at the same time. Inside, there's a closet. In the closet, there's a box. She doesn't open it often. Today, she doesn't open it at all, she just looks at it, sitting there on the shelf where it sat for 3 years, undisturbed. A strip of tape holding the lid shut like tape could actually keep anything contained. Because it's not really about the tape. It's about the fact that everything inside that box belongs to a version of her that doesn't exist in this house, doesn't exist to her father, doesn't exist, officially, on paper, anywhere at all. She used to open it more, in the beginning, back when the silence still felt fresh enough to hurt in a specific way, a way she could point to, a way that made sense. She'd sit on the closet floor some nights with the lid cracked just enough to see the edge of a folded flag she was never given permission to display, And she'd ask herself the same question over and over. What was it all for, if nobody who loves me gets to know it happened? She doesn't ask that question anymore. Mostly because she stopped believing there was an answer worth finding. Her phone buzzes on the kitchen counter, screen lighting up against the dim morning gray still pooling through the window. D. She stares at it the way she stared at that kid at the range. Like it might go away if she just waits long enough. It doesn't. She picks up. Vivienne. Her father's voice. Flat. Formal even now, even after everything, even though she is his daughter and not one of the privates he used to command. Tonight. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. I remember, Dad, do you? Not a question. Never a question with him. Because you forgot Easter. I had work. You always have work. A pause, the kind he uses like punctuation, sharper than any comma. This is your brother's night, Vivienne, not yours, so wear something appropriate. And he stops. She knows what's coming. She's heard some version of it her whole life, dressed in different words, but always circling the same wound. Don't embarrass us. The line goes dead before she can answer, which is fine, because she doesn't have an answer. She never has. 28 years old, and there is still, apparently, no correct response to being told by your own father not to be an embarrassment at your brother's dinner. Some sentences just aren't built to be answered. They're built to be absorbed. She sets the phone down on the counter, slow, careful, like it's made of something that might shatter if she's not gentle. Except it's not the phone that's fragile. She looks at her own hand. Steady. It's always steady. Steady enough to put a round through a target the width of a dinner plate from 6 football fields away. Steady enough to hold a man's life in the crosshairs and decide, in less than a second, whether he lives or dies. Not steady enough, apparently, to hold her father's approval. Funny how that works. Funny in the way that isn't funny at all. The way grief is sometimes called funny by people trying to survive it without crying in public. She used to think it was about being good enough. Thought that for years. Actually thought if she just trained harder, scored higher, came home with one more ribbon, one more line on a resume he'd never get to read, something would finally click into place between them. Now she's 28 and she still doesn't know what it was ever really about. Maybe she never will. Maybe some doors just don't open, no matter how many times you learn to pick the lock. 21 years ago, she was 7, and her father's hands were the whole world. Big hands. Scarred across the knuckles in a way she didn't understand yet, didn't know yet meant something violent had happened to make skin look that way. He knelt behind her in the tall grass by the Cape Fear River, his chest against her back, showing her how to steady a rifle 3 times too big for her. Not with your arms, he told her, voice low, patient in a way she barely recognizes now when she tries to remember it. With your bones. Let your bones hold the weight. Muscles get tired. Bones don't. She remembers the smell of pine and gun oil, the particular sweetness of cut grass baking in July heat. She remembers her mother's laugh drifting up from the porch, the sound carrying across the yard, warm, easy, alive, mixing with the clink of ice in a lemonade pitcher and the screen door swinging shut behind her with its familiar tired creak. You've got a good eye, Vivi girl. Her father's voice again. Softer than she's heard it in years. Better than your brother's gonna have. Better than mine was at your age. Better than yours? 7-year-old her. Wide-eyed, disbelieving, twisting around to check if he was teasing. Better than mine. He'd smiled then. She remembers that too, the rare, unguarded shape of it, the way it made his whole face look 10 years younger. Don't tell your mother I said so. She'll think I'm playing favorites. He was. Everybody knew he was. And for a few years, that was the sweetest kind of secret a little girl could carry, the quiet certainty that her father saw something in her nobody else could see. Something specific, something rare. There's another memory, right behind that one, the way memories tend to stack in a person's mind without permission. Her mother, that same summer, braiding Vivi's hair on the porch steps while Holt cleaned his rifle on the other end of the porch. The two of them talking low and easy about nothing in particular, and her mother's fingers pausing every so often to press a kiss to the crown of Vivi's head for no reason at all. except that she felt like it. Your daddy's going to spoil you rotten with all that shooting talk, her mother had said, laughing. Make sure you learn to bake something too. A girl should know how to do more than one thing well. I can do both, 7-year-old Vivi had said, fierce, certain, the way only a child can be certain about something with absolutely no evidence to back it up. Her mother had laughed at that. Really laughed. I believe you, baby, I do. She holds on to that memory sometimes, in the dark, in the months when the silence between her and her father grows so wide, it feels like a canyon neither of them knows how to cross. She holds on to it and wonders again and again at what exact point the man in that memory became the man on the phone this morning. At what exact point the porch went quiet. At what exact point her mother's laugh stopped being a sound this family got to hear every single day and became, instead, something Vivi has to work to remember correctly, afraid that one day the memory will wear smooth the way a coin does, losing its detail the more she handles it. She has a theory. She's had it for years. It has to do with a hospital hallway and a phone call and an interstate median at 11 o'clock at night. But theories don't fix anything. They just sit there in a person's chest like a stone, keeping them company on the bad nights. She showers, dresses slow, deliberate, the way she used to prep before a mission. Not because tonight is a mission, though some part of her brain insists on treating it like one anyway. Old habits refusing to recognize the difference between a hostile compound and a dining room. Black dress. Simple. Hair down instead of the tight, practical braid she wears every other day of her life. She almost doesn't recognize the woman in the mirror, soft-edged, ordinary-looking, nothing about her giving away the fact that she can put a round through a target from 6 football fields out. Which is, she supposes, exactly the point of the last 3 years. Disappearing. Becoming ordinary enough that nobody looks twice. She used to be good at being looked at once. Before all this, she remembers being 19, home on leave, twirling in a sundress for her mother, in this same house, this same mirror, laughing about some boy from town who'd asked her to a dance she never went to because she'd already shipped out again by the time it happened. Her mother isn't here to see this dress, hasn't been here for 13 years now. And some nights that absence still lands sharp and sudden, a grief that never fully scarred over, just learned to sit quieter than it used to. There's a small velvet box in her nightstand drawer. She doesn't open it tonight. Just rests her hand flat against the drawer's surface for a moment, the way a person might rest a hand against a door they're not ready to walk through yet. And then she pulls it back, closes the drawer, picks up her keys instead. She stops at Ruth Ann Delgado's place on the way because she always does. Because Ruth Ann's the only person in this town who still treats her like a whole person instead of a cautionary tale. Ruth Ann's sitting on her own porch when Vivi pulls up, snapping green beans into a bowl in her lap the way she's done every summer evening Vivi can remember since childhood. Ruth Ann was her mother's closest friend. Still keeps a photograph of the two of them, young and laughing, propped on her mantle like it happened yesterday instead of 30 years ago. Look at you. Ruth Ann sets the bowl aside, eyes crinkling, all dressed up for the prince's coronation. Don't start. I'm not starting anything, baby, I'm just saying. Ruth Ann pats the seat beside her. Vivi sits, just for a minute, just long enough to steal a little of the calm radiating off this porch like heat off summer pavement. Your daddy called me last week. Wanted my honey-glazed ham recipe for tonight. Didn't mention you once in the whole conversation. Sounds about right. It is not right. Ruth Ann's voice sharpens, just slightly, protective in the way only an old family friend's voice can be. I watched that man teach you to shoot a rifle before you could ride a two-wheeler, without training wheels. I watched him call you his best shot in front of half this county. And now, he can't even say your name at his own dinner table without some kind of insult tucked inside it. That's not right, Vivienne. That's grief wearing a uniform it never earned. Vivi doesn't answer right away, just looks out at Ruth Ann's yard, at the fireflies starting their slow blink against the coming dark. I don't know how to fix it, she says finally, quiet, honest in a way she isn't usually, not even with herself. I don't know if it's fixable. Maybe it's not your job to fix it. Ruth Ann picks the bowl of beans back up, resumes snapping steady and unhurried. Maybe it's just your job to keep showing up anyway. Some doors don't open because you pushed hard enough. They open because you never stopped standing in front of them. Vivi doesn't have an answer for that either. She just squeezes Ruth Ann's hand once, quick, grateful, and gets back in the car before the light goes any dimmer. 21 minutes later, she's turning up the long gravel drive of the house she grew up in. By 4 in the afternoon, the Hargrove house in Fayetteville had already been humming with the particular kind of tension that only comes with hosting. And by 7, that tension has settled into something close to performance. White tablecloths, rented chairs unfolded in neat rows, a caterer's van that spent the afternoon parked crooked in the driveway because Holt Hargrove insisted on directing traffic himself. The way he's directed everything in this family for 30 years. The way he probably directed convoys once, decades ago, in a desert half a world away, barking instructions nobody asked for and nobody dared ignore. Grant is upstairs getting dressed, 23 years old, and glowing with a kind of nervous pride that hasn't yet been worn down by disappointment. Tonight is his night. Officially. A dinner in his honor, thrown by his father, attended by half the retired officer corps within a 50-mile radius. To celebrate the fact that 2nd Lieutenant Grant Hargrove West Point, class of this year, top third of his cohort, is finally, formally, one of them. Holt stands in the dining room adjusting a framed photograph on the wall. Black and white, curling slightly at the corners despite the frame. A young captain, desert fatigues, squinting into a sun that doesn't exist in North Carolina. 1991. Kuwait. The war that made him. The war he still talks about like it happened last week instead of 35 years ago. He straightens the frame a half inch to the left, steps back, studies it the way another man might study a painting in a museum, reverent, proprietary, like the memory belongs to him alone and no one else has the right to touch it. There's a second photograph beside it, newer. Grant in his dress uniform, cadet gray, West Point in the background. Holt's hand lingers there too. Oh, straightening what doesn't need straightening. There is no third photograph on that wall. There used to be. Once. A woman in fatigues, younger than Vivi is now, squinting into a different sun on a different continent, holding a rifle she'd been trained to use by the very man standing in this room. That photograph isn't gone because it never existed. It's gone because Holt took it down himself, years ago, quietly without a word, and neither of them has ever mentioned it since. He'd told himself, at the time, it was a kindness, a way of not rubbing salt into a wound he didn't fully understand. He tells himself that still, most days. Some days he doesn't quite believe it. The doorbell rings at 6:50. Grant thunders down the stairs 2 at a time. Dress uniform, crisp tie slightly crooked in the way of a young man who's tied it 4 times and given up on the 5th attempt. "Do I look okay?" he asks, breathless, straightening his collar in the hallway mirror. "Dad, you look like a Hargrove," Holt says, and there's real warmth in it, unguarded, the kind of warmth that's harder to find in his voice these days than it used to be. He steps forward, fixes the crooked tie himself with 2 efficient tugs, the way he's fixed 100 uniforms over 30 years of service. "Your grandfather would have been proud tonight." "You think so?" "I know so." Holt claps a hand on his son's shoulder, firm, steady. "3rd generation, Grant. Not every family gets to say that." Grant beams, ducks his head, a little embarrassed by the praise, a little hungry for more of it, the particular hunger of a young man who's spent his whole life trying to live up to a name. "Is Vivi coming?" he asks, almost as an afterthought, glancing toward the door. Something flickers across Holt's face. Quick, gone almost before it arrives. She said she would. Good. Grant means it. He's never quite understood the distance between his father and his sister, was too young when it started to remember the before, too used to the after to question it much anymore. He just knows he misses her sometimes, in a vague, wistful way, the way you miss a room in a house you don't visit often enough. "I want her here. Tonight especially." Holt doesn't answer that directly, just nods once, short, and turns back toward the dining room to check the table settings for the 4th time in an hour. The guests arrive in waves starting at 7. Neighbors first, then old family friends, then, closer to 7:30, 3 retired colonels and a brigadier general who insists everyone still call him general. Even though he's been out of uniform for a decade, his booming laugh filling the entry hall before he's even fully through the door. A local state senator arrives soon after, 2 tours as an infantry officer behind him, back when Holt was still active, back when the two of them ran in the same circles, drank the same bourbon, told the same war stories that get a little more polished every time they're told. Dale Pruitt arrives at 7:45, exactly on time as always, carrying a bottle of good scotch and a grin that's been Holt's oldest, steadiest friendship for over 20 years. He claps Holt on the back the way he always does. Warm, familiar, easy. "Big night," Dale says. "Feels like yesterday you were bragging about that boy's acceptance letter. Feels like yesterday you were telling me to relax about it." Holt smiles, genuine, the particular ease of a friendship worn soft and comfortable over decades. "You look tired, Dale." Sleeps for the young. Dale waves it off, quick, deflecting in the practiced way of a man who's gotten good at deflecting things. "Where do you want this scotch?" Vivi arrives at 6:40, exactly 20 minutes early, because being early is a habit that never left her even after everything else did. She sits in her car for a long moment before going in, hands resting on the wheel, breathing slow, counting the way she counts before a shot 4 in, hold for 4 out. She goes in. Her father meets her at the door, doesn't hug her, just looks her up and down, quick, assessing, the way he might inspect a recruit reporting for duty. "Good," he says. "That'll do." 2 words. That's the whole review. She wants to say something back, something sharp, something true, something that might finally crack the 30 years of silence sitting between them, like a locked door neither of them has the key to. She's rehearsed a dozen versions of it on the drive over, actually sharp lines, quiet lines, lines that might land soft enough to open a conversation instead of a wound. She doesn't say any of them, because tonight isn't about her. Tonight is Grant's night. She reminds herself of that the way she reminds herself to breathe out slow before a shot deliberately, because it doesn't come naturally anymore. So instead she just nods, steps inside, lets the door close behind her. Grant finds her almost immediately, pulling her into a hug so full and unguarded, it nearly knocks the breath out of her. "You came," he says, muffled against her shoulder. "I wasn't sure you would. Of course I came." She pulls back, studies him, really studies him, the way she hasn't let herself in months, and feels a rush of something painfully tender at the sight of him all grown up. Uniform sharp, eyes bright, with a hope she remembers having once herself. "Look at you. Lieutenant Hargrove. Feels weird when you say it like that. Get used to it." She squeezes his arm. "You earned it. Doesn't feel like I earned anything yet." Grant glances toward their father, lowering his voice slightly. "Feels like I just showed up and let people clap for me." "That's not nothing, Grant." Something in her voice goes softer than she means it to. "Showing up counts for more than you think." He looks at her a moment, longer than the conversation calls for, like he's about to say something else, something closer to the surface than small talk. But then someone calls his name from across the room, the general, booming, wanting to shake the newest lieutenant's hand, and the moment slips away before either of them can catch it. By 7:15 the house is full. The dining room glows amber under the chandelier. Laughter rolls easy around the long table. Somebody's already refilling glasses. Grant sits near the head of the table, uniform pressed sharp, cheeks flushed pink from the attention, looking exactly like a young man who has spent his whole life being told he was destined for exactly this moment. Vivi sits near the far end. Not hidden, exactly. Just placed. The way a chess piece gets placed somewhere it won't interfere with the game. She watches her father stand. Watches the room quiet, the way room's always quiet for him. Some old muscle memory of command still living in his spine even in retirement, even in a dining room instead of a briefing tent. "To my son," Holt says, raising his glass. His voice carries the way it always does, trained, deliberate, built for open air and moving troops. Not softened even instantly for a room this small. 3rd-generation Hargrove to wear the uniform. His grandfather served. I served. And now Lieutenant Grant Hargrove. Applause. Warm, real applause. The kind that makes a young man's chest swell. Holt's eyes flick, just briefly, down the table, toward her. Legacy means something in this family, he adds. Just a beat too long. Just pointed enough that a few heads turn, curious, following the direction of his gaze without quite understanding why. Some of us honor it better than others. The room doesn't gasp. It's too polite for that. But something shifts a ripple. Small, the kind only a daughter would notice. Because a daughter has spent her whole life learning to read the weather in her father's voice. Vivi keeps her face still. She's had a lot of practice at that too. Under the table, though, her hand curls into a fist against her napkin. Because there's a version of tonight where she stands up right now, says something, names exactly what he's doing, in front of everyone, the way he's just done to her. There's a version of tonight where 30 years of silence finally cracks wide open over the shrimp cocktail. She doesn't do that either. A woman across the table, the senator's wife, kind-faced, a little too curious for her own good, leans forward with the particular brightness of someone about to fill an awkward silence with a question she thinks is friendly. And what is it you do, Vivienne? Simple question. Innocent, even. The kind asked at every dinner table in America 1,000 times a night. Except here, tonight, in this house, it lands like a dropped glass. Vivi opens her mouth, closes it. Because how does she even begin to answer a question like that? Honestly, when the honest answer is classified, when the honest answer got buried 3 years ago, under a story she was ordered to tell, and has told so many times now that some nights even she almost believes it. Which is its own particular kind of exhausting, carrying a lie so long it starts to feel truer than the truth underneath it. Before she can find words that are both true and allowed, her father answers for her. She teaches people how to shoot paper targets, Holt says. Light, almost fond if you didn't know him, if you couldn't hear the blade underneath the tone. Didn't quite make it past the entry stuff herself. Some people just aren't built for it. Laughter. Small, uncomfortable, the kind that happens when a room isn't sure if something was a joke. Vivi feels her jaw tighten, feels her hands go still under the table, the exact stillness she uses on the range, the stillness that means every ounce of feeling has been rerouted somewhere else. So it doesn't show on her face. She doesn't correct him. She never corrects him. Because correcting him would mean explaining, and explaining would mean breaking rules that were never hers to break in the first place. So she just sits there, absorbs it, the way she's absorbed every version of this moment for the last 3 years. The same story told a different way at a different table in front of different strangers, always landing on the same conclusion. Some people just aren't built for it. If only he knew. Grant, 3 seats down, frowns slightly, opens his mouth like he might say something. Dad, come on, that's not fair. But the general's already launching into a story about his own basic training days, loud and long-winded, and the moment passes before Grant fully commits to it. He glances at his sister instead, apologetic, a silent "I'm sorry" that doesn't quite reach across the table, but that Vivi catches anyway and appreciates more than she'd ever admit out loud. Dale Pruitt, seated near Holt, laughs along with the table, but his eyes linger on Vivi a beat too long. Something calculating behind the friendly crinkle of his smile. Something Vivi doesn't notice tonight because she has no reason yet to be looking for it. Nobody at this table does. The dinner rolls on. Plates cleared, replaced, cleared again. Stories traded back and forth across the table. Old deployments, old jokes, the particular comfortable rhythm of men who've spent decades in the same rooms together, trading the same anecdotes until they've been sanded smooth as river stones. Vivi excuses herself once briefly, stepping out onto the back patio for air, needing 30 seconds where nobody's watching her, measuring her, deciding what she is based on a story that was never hers to tell. The night is warm. Crickets going steady in the grass. She closes her eyes, breathes, counts backward from 10 the way she used to before a mission briefing, and by the time she opens them again, she's steadier, ready to go back in, ready to sit through however many more hours of this it takes to get through Grant's night without cracking. She doesn't know yet that she won't have to wait that long. She doesn't know yet that in exactly 11 minutes, everything in that dining room is about to change. The front door opens sometime around 8, unannounced, without the doorbell, the way only someone who used to have a standing invitation to this house would walk in. Conversation dips. Heads turn. A man steps into the dining room doorway. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Dress uniform sharp enough to cut glass. The kind of bearing that makes a crowded room instinctively straighten its own posture without being asked. Silver eagles glint on his shoulders. Colonel. Holt's face breaks into the first real smile of the night. Marcus. He rises, crosses the room, hand already extended. You made it. Wouldn't have missed it. The newcomer's voice is calm, measured, the kind of voice built for giving orders that get followed without hesitation. West Point men, both of you now. Figured I owed you a toast. Laughter, warmer this time, genuine. Holt claps him on the shoulder, guides him toward the table, already launching into an introduction. This is Colonel Marcus Webb. We roomed together plebe year. Best marksman in our class besides me. Don't let him tell you otherwise. Webb's eyes drift down the table as Holt talks, and stop. On Vivi. Something shifts across his face. Recognition, sharp and immediate, the kind that can't be faked. The kind that comes from somewhere far deeper than casual acquaintance. Vivi feels it before she consciously registers it, a prickle down the back of her neck. The old animal instinct of a soldier realizing, half a second before her brain catches up, that something in the room has just changed shape entirely. The room doesn't notice yet. Holt doesn't notice yet. Still talking, still gesturing toward Grant, still narrating his own version of the night's importance. But Vivi notices. Vivi always notices, and what she notices now sends something cold and electric straight down her spine. Because she knows this man. Not knows of him, knows him. Knows the particular gravel in his voice when he gives an order over comms in the dark. Knows the exact weight of his hand on her shoulder after her first confirmed kill. The way he'd said, "Good work, soldier," without a shred of ceremony. 'Cause in that unit ceremony got people killed. Knows him the way you know someone who watched you become who you are, and then watched the army erase every record of it. Webb crosses the room. Slowly. Deliberately. Every step measured like he's crossing a parade ground instead of a dining room floor. He stops in front of her chair. The whole table has gone quiet now. Even Holt has stopped talking, confused, his smile faltering at the edges as he watches his oldest friend walk straight past his son, straight past the guest of honor, to stand in front of the daughter he'd just called, not built for it. Webb comes to attention. A full, formal, textbook position of attention, heels together. Chin level, shoulders squared, the kind of posture nobody uses at a dinner party. The kind of posture reserved for something else entirely. And then he salutes her. A crisp, deliberate, unmistakable salute, held for a full 3 seconds. The kind given only from one soldier to another. The kind that acknowledges rank, service, sacrifice, everything this room has spent all night, pretending she doesn't have. Ghost 6, he says. 2 words, quiet. But they land in that silent room like a gunshot. Nobody at that table understands what those words mean. Nobody except Vivi, whose whole body has gone rigid, whose breath has caught somewhere behind her ribs, whose eyes are locked on a man she hasn't seen in 3 years, and never expected to see again, not here, not like this, not in front of her father, Colonel Webb. Her voice comes out steadier than she feels. Barely. It's been a while. Too long. His hand finally drops. His eyes don't leave hers. You disappeared on me, Sergeant. Sergeant. The word detonates quietly across the table. Holt's face has gone the color of old paper. Grant's fork has stopped halfway to his mouth. The senator's wife is staring, open-mouthed, at the woman she'd asked a friendly question of 20 minutes ago and been told wasn't built for it. Marcus. Holt's voice comes out strange, thin. Nothing like the voice he used 30 seconds ago. What is this? Webb turns, and for the first time all night, his expression cools into something harder, something almost disappointed. You don't know? It isn't really a question. It's an accusation dressed up as one. Holt looks at his daughter, really looks at her, maybe for the first time in years, like he's seeing something in her face he spent a long time deliberately not looking for. "Know what?" he says. Quiet now. Very quiet. Webb's jaw tightens. He glances at Vivi, a question in his eyes. "Permission, are you sure? Do you want me to say this here?" And Vivi, God help her, doesn't know the answer. Doesn't know if 3 years of silence is about to break wide open in front of 40 strangers and a chandelier and a table full of untouched dessert. She says nothing. So Webb says it for her. "Your daughter," he says, turning back to Holt, voice carrying now, deliberate, meant for the whole room to hear. "Served under my direct command for 2 years. Overseas. Classified operation. She was the best precision shooter I had in that unit, and I've commanded some of the best this country's ever trained." Silence. Complete, ringing silence. The kind that makes a dropped fork sound like a car crash. "She saved 11 lives on a single deployment that officially never happened," Webb continues, each word landing like a struck bell. "I put her in for a commendation myself. It got buried. Because everything about that operation got buried, including, apparently," his eyes flick, briefly, painfully, back to Holt, "including from her own family." Holt doesn't move, doesn't speak. His glass sits forgotten in his hand, tilting slightly, wine threatening to spill over the rim, and no one, not even him, seeming to notice. Grant stares at his sister like he's seeing her for the first time. Some old childhood memory of her rearranging itself in real time behind his eyes, the way she used to disappear for months at a time, and come back thinner, quieter, older around the eyes than a person her age should be. He'd never let himself ask why. Now he doesn't have to. Dale Pruitt's face, if anyone had thought to watch it in that moment, does something strange. Something that isn't shock at all. Something closer to calculation, quick and gone. The particular expression of a man filing away a piece of information he didn't expect to receive but already knows exactly how to use. Nobody's watching Dale Pruitt's face. Vivi feels every eye in the room swing toward her. Feels the weight of 30 years of "don't embarrass us" collapsing under the sudden, impossible fact that the most embarrassing thing that happened tonight has nothing to do with her at all. She stands. Slowly, deliberately, the same controlled motion she uses to rise from a firing position after a long cold hold, careful, unhurried, giving nothing away. "Excuse me," she says, to no one and everyone. "I need some air." She doesn't run. She's never been a person who runs. She walks, steady, spine straight, past her stunned brother, past the senator's wife whose hand has drifted to her own throat, past her father, who says nothing, who does nothing, who just watches her go with an expression she has never once seen on his face before. Something that might, if she let herself believe it, be the beginning of shame. The night air outside hits her like cold water. She stands on the porch steps, hands braced on the railing, breathing in slow through her nose the way she was trained to. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The same rhythm she uses to steady a scope before a shot she can't afford to miss. Behind her, through the open window, she can hear the dining room erupting into a dozen hushed, urgent conversations at once. Her father's name, murmured. Her own name, murmured differently now, in a tone she isn't used to hearing attached to it. Confusion. Disbelief. Something, underneath it all, that sounds almost like awe, and that unsettles her more than the shame did. She doesn't go back inside. She just stands there in the dark, looking out at a front yard she grew up running through barefoot, a rifle range's worth of skill buried somewhere in her chest that her own father spent 3 years pretending didn't exist. And for the first time all night, she isn't sure whether what's rising up inside her is relief or fear. Because if Marcus Webb showed up tonight, uninvited, unscheduled, saying things that were supposed to stay buried forever, he didn't come here for a toast. She knows that with a certainty that settles cold and heavy in her stomach, the exact same certainty she used to feel in the field half a second before things went wrong. He didn't drive however many hours to crash a dinner party and salute her in front of 40 strangers, just to make a point about pride, about legacy, about all the things her father stood up and toasted to 20 minutes ago. He came here because something is wrong, and whatever it is, it's about to pull her whole family into a story none of them are ready for. The screen door creaks behind her. She doesn't turn around. She already knows the weight of that step, the particular unhurried cadence of it. The way this man has never once in his life rushed toward anything he didn't have to. Which means whatever he's about to say next isn't the kind of thing you rush into either. She braces herself, breathes out slow, and waits for the rest of it to begin. The screen door creaks behind her. She doesn't turn around. She already knows the weight of that step, the particular unhurried cadence of it. The way this man has never once in his life rushed toward anything he didn't have to. You didn't have to do that in there, she says. Doesn't look at him. Just watches the dark yard, the shape of the old oak tree her father used to hang a tire swing from, back when this family still knew how to be simple. Yes, I did. Webb's voice, low, close now, standing beside her at the railing. 3 years, Vivi. 3 years of watching that man talk about you like you washed out. I wasn't gonna stand there and eat prime rib while he did it again. It's not your fight. Isn't it? She turns then, because something in his tone isn't casual, isn't a friend defending a friend. It's something else, something with edges. Why are you here, Marcus? He doesn't answer right away, which is its own kind of answer, because the Marcus Webb she served under never hesitated, not once. Not in 2 years of missions where hesitation got people zipped into bags. So the fact that he's hesitating now, on a porch, in North Carolina, in front of a house full of chandeliers and dessert plates, that scares her more than anything he could actually say. Not out here, he says finally. Glances back toward the window, the muffled sound of 40 confused dinner guests trying to pretend they didn't just witness a family implode. Is there somewhere we can talk? Just us. There's a shed, out back. My father used to keep his gear in it. She's already moving down the porch steps before she finishes the sentence. Nobody'll look for us there. Some things don't change, some things do. She glances back at him, sharp. I used to think my father was the only person who'd ever really seen me. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things tonight. He doesn't answer that. Just falls into step beside her, boots crunching soft against gravel, moving through the dark like two ghosts slipping out of a party neither of them was really invited to anymore. Behind them, through the lit window, she can see shapes moving. Her father gesturing, saying something to Grant that Grant clearly doesn't understand. Dale Pruitt, standing slightly apart from the rest, a glass in his hand he isn't drinking from, watching the yard through the glass with an expression Vivi doesn't have the bandwidth tonight to notice, let alone question. The shed smells like cut grass and gun oil. Same as it did when she was 9 years old. Hiding out here on nights her parents fought about things she wasn't supposed to hear. Holt's old cleaning kit still sits on the shelf. A coil of paracord, a faded unit patch pinned to a corkboard, the fabric gone soft and gray with age. A calendar from 4 years ago still hangs on a nail. Forgotten, pages never turned past March. Webb closes the door behind them. Doesn't turn on the light. Moonlight through the one dusty window is enough. Talk, Vivi says, arms crossed. Every muscle in her body braced for something fine. He exhales. Long. Tired in a way she's never seen him tired before. Not even after 36 hours awake in a compound outside Raqqa, with half the team wounded and comms down. You remember Al-Jarrah. Her stomach drops. Because of course she remembers. You don't forget the name of the man you had in your crosshairs for 11 minutes and then chose, against every order, screaming in your earpiece not to kill. What about him? He's dead. Webb says it flat. Simple. The way you report a fact, not a feeling. 6 weeks ago. Turkish border. Somebody put 2 rounds in his chest at 400 yards and walked away clean. Okay. She doesn't understand yet why this is her problem. Doesn't understand why it required a colonel to drive 200 miles and crash a dinner party to tell her a man from a mission that officially never happened is officially dead. So somebody finished the job I didn't. That's what I thought too. Webb's eyes find hers in the dark, until his brother started asking questions about who was on Overwatch that day in 2021, about who called the abort, about a name he heard once, years ago, from Al-Jarrah himself, before we ever pulled him in. The shed goes very quiet. "What name?" Vivi says. Though some part of her already knows, already feels it landing in her chest before he even says it. Ghost 6. There it is. The name Webb said out loud at that dinner table, 20 minutes ago, in front of her entire family, in front of a room full of people who now know a piece of a truth she spent 3 years being ordered to bury. "He's here," Webb says. "Quiet now. In the States. Entered through Toronto 4 days ago on a passport we're still trying to trace." Last confirmed location, he pauses, and something in his face tightens. 90 miles from this house. The floor doesn't move. The shed doesn't shake. But something inside Vivi's chest does both at once. A slow-motion collapse she's only felt twice before in her life, once on a rooftop overseas, and once at her mother's funeral, standing at the edge of a grave that still, 13 years later, doesn't feel like it should have been dug. "You're telling me," she says, very carefully, like each word might detonate if she says it wrong, that a man is hunting down the person responsible for his brother's death, and he thinks that person is me. "I'm telling you he's hunting down Ghost 6. Webb's jaw is tight, which used to be a call sign nobody outside a locked room could connect to a name. Until tonight. Until I stood in that dining room and said it out loud in front of 40 people who have no clearance to hear it." Vivi stares at him. "You didn't know," she says slowly. "You came here to warn me, and then you blew my cover in front of my whole family anyway." "I came here," Webb says, and for the first time his voice cracks, just slightly, just enough to show the guilt underneath, "because I thought you deserved to hear it from me before you heard it on the news. I didn't plan on losing my temper at your father's dinner table. That part's on me." Silence stretches long between them. Outside, faint. She can hear the party still limping along, voices, glasses, the strained laughter of people trying to pretend the last 20 minutes didn't happen. She thinks, unbidden, of the mission itself, of the rooftop overlooking that compound, the desert heat pressing down even after dark, sweat running cold down her spine despite it. Al-Jarrah in her scope, exactly where intelligence said he'd be, exactly the shot she'd trained her whole life to take without hesitation. Except there'd been a girl, 8, maybe 9 years old, appearing in the doorway behind him at the exact moment. The order came through her earpiece. "Take the shot. Ghost 6. You are clear to engage small and barefoot," and utterly unaware that her presence had just turned a clean kill into something else entirely. Something that would follow Vivi home, across an ocean, and sit in her chest for 3 years, like a stone that never stopped being heavy. She'd called the abort herself. No permission asked. Just a single, flat transmission, negative, civilian in frame. "I am not clear to engage," and then the longest 60 seconds of her life, waiting to see if command would override her, waiting to see if somebody above her pay grade would decide a strategic target mattered more than a child standing 8 feet behind him. They didn't override her, but they didn't forgive her either. Not really. Not in any way that ever got written down where anyone could see it. "I need you to understand something," she says now, quiet, mostly to herself. "I didn't spare him because I was weak. I spared him because there was a little girl standing behind him. I'd make the same call again tonight if I had to. I know that." Webb's voice softens, just slightly. "I was there, Vivi. I heard the transmission. I fought for you afterward, fought hard, harder than you probably know, to keep that call from ending your career entirely. I don't need convincing. Then why does it feel like the whole world still thinks I failed? Because the world was never allowed to hear what actually happened." His voice is gentle now, the gentlest she's heard it in years. "That's the whole tragedy of what you did. The right call, made in under 3 seconds, under fire, and the reward for it was silence. Silence dressed up as an administrative discharge nobody outside a locked room was ever going to question." Vivi presses the heel of her hand against her eyes for a moment, just a moment, long enough to breathe, long enough to remind her body that this is a shed in North Carolina and not a rooftop half a world away. "So what do I do now?" she says finally, not really a question, more like a plea dressed up as one. "You disappear for a few days, somewhere quiet, somewhere he doesn't know to look." Webb steps closer, "and you let me build a picture of what he actually wants. Revenge. Information. Leverage. Because until I know which one, I can't tell you how close he's willing to get to do it. He already knows where I live, I know. He might already know about my father. My brother. Webb doesn't answer that. Doesn't have to. The silence says enough. And that's the moment it stops being about her. Because for 3 years, Vivi has carried the weight of Al Jarrah alone. The mission, the abort call, nobody understood. The choice that cost her a career and a family's respect, and nearly got her court-martialed for insubordination, before somebody higher up decided quiet discharge was cleaner than a trial. She's carried all of it alone, in silence, behind a locked box in a closet. But this isn't about her anymore. This is about a house full of people right now, on the other side of that shed wall, who have no idea a stranger with a rifle might already know their address. I need to tell my father, she says. Vivi, no. She's already moving toward the door. You don't get to walk into my life after 3 years and tell me who I get to protect and who I don't. That's my father in there. My brother. If there's a threat sitting 90 miles from this house, they need to know. All of it, starting tonight. Webb doesn't stop her. Just watches her go, something unreadable moving across his face, pride maybe, or grief. Hard to tell in the dark. She finds her father alone in his study. 20 minutes later, after the last guests have finally trickled out into the night, with awkward, half-finished goodbyes, and too many unanswered questions trailing behind them like smoke. She'd watched Dale Pruitt leave from the hallway window, watched him linger a moment too long by his car. Phone already pressed to his ear before he'd even pulled out of the driveway. Though it means nothing to her yet, means nothing to anyone yet. Just a small, forgettable detail swallowed up by a much bigger night. Holt is alone by the window when she comes in, glass in hand, untouched, staring out at nothing. He doesn't turn when she comes in. You could have told me, he says. Quiet, rough around the edges in a way she's never heard from him, instead of letting me find out from Marcus, in front of the whole town. You could have asked, she says back, just as quiet, just as raw, instead of telling everyone for 3 years that I wasn't built for it. He flinches, actually flinches, like she's landed a physical blow. She's never seen her father flinch from anything in her whole life. Not from artillery fire, according to the stories. Not from her mother's cancer diagnosis, at least not where anyone could see. Wait, not cancer. She corrects the thought instantly. An old reflex, an old grief that still occasionally scrambles its own facts in the dark. Not cancer, the accident. 13 years now, and some nights her mind still tries to soften the sharp, senseless edges of it into something with a diagnosis, a timeline, a reason. It never had any of those things. It just had a median strip on I-95 and a driver who never should have been behind a wheel that night. Not once in 28 years has she watched Holt Hargrove's composure crack. It's cracking now, I thought. He starts, stops, tries again. I thought you failed selection. That's what the letter said. Administrative separation. Insufficient, his voice catches, insufficient performance under evaluated conditions. That's the cover story, Dad. I know that now. He finally turns to face her. His eyes are wet. She has genuinely never seen this before. Not once. Not at her mother's funeral, not ever. I've known it for exactly 23 minutes. So now you know. She crosses her arms, holding herself together with her own 2 hands because there's nobody else in this room willing to do it for her. I was the best shooter in a classified Overwatch unit. I saved 11 lives on paper, nobody's allowed to read. And I let a man live who I'd been ordered to kill, because killing him would have meant killing an 11-year-old girl standing 8 feet behind him. She corrects the age without meaning to, some part of her unwilling even now to let the smallest detail of that day slip out of focus. 8, maybe 9. Small enough that command wanted to argue about whether she even counted as being in frame. That's why I got discharged, Dad. Not because I failed, because I made a call, the right one, and it cost me everything. Holt's glass slips from his fingers, doesn't shatter the study carpet, catches it, dulling the impact, wine bleeding slow into the fibers like a wound that won't stop. Neither of them moves to pick it up. Why didn't you tell me, he says, barely audible. Because you never asked. The words come out sharper than she means them to, or maybe exactly as sharp as she means them to. You just decided I'd failed, and you never once asked me why. He doesn't have an answer for that, which, coming from Holt Hargrove, a man who always has an answer, a plan, a directive, is its own kind of confession. They stand there, father and daughter, 28 years and 3 feet of study carpet between them, and neither one of them knowing how to close the distance. There's something else, Vivi says finally, because the shed conversation with Webb hasn't gone anywhere, hasn't stopped being true, just because she's spent the last 10 minutes bleeding old wounds all over her father's study. The man from that mission, he's here, in the country. He might already know where we live. Holt's whole body changes. The grief drains out of his face, replaced by something older, harder. Something she recognizes because she's seen it in her own mirror 100 times, the exact moment a soldier stops feeling and starts calculating. How close, he says. 90 miles when Webb last confirmed. Grant. Her father's voice sharpens instantly. Does he know Grant's name? His face? His unit assignment? I don't know. Find out. He's already moving, already reaching for the phone on his desk. 30 years of command reflex, firing back to life in an instant. Whatever this is, whatever you've been carrying alone for 3 years, it's not just yours anymore. It's this family's now. And I am done. His voice cracks again, just slightly. I am done finding out things about my own daughter secondhand. For the first time in 3 years, Vivi doesn't feel like she's facing her father alone. She feels, for one strange, unfamiliar moment, like she's facing something with him. It doesn't fix 30 years. It doesn't erase the dinner table, the paper target's comment. The years of "don't embarrass us" dropped like small stones into a well that never stopped filling. But it's something. A crack in a door that's been shut so long she'd stopped believing it could open at all. Grant knocks softly a moment later, hovering in the doorway, still in his dress uniform, tie finally loosened, looking younger somehow than he did at dinner 2 hours ago. Is somebody going to tell me what's happening, he says. Quiet, not demanding, just tired and scared, and trying not to show either. Vivi looks at her father. Her father looks back at her, and something passes between them, an agreement neither of them says out loud, but that both of them understand completely. No more silence. Not in this house. Not anymore. Sit down, Grant, Vivi says, gently. There's a lot you don't know about your sister. I think it's time you did. Sleep doesn't come that night. Vivi sits on the edge of the guest bed, her old childhood room, technically, though nothing in it feels like hers anymore. Repurposed years ago into a generic space with a quilt that doesn't match anything she remembers choosing, and stares at her phone. One contact, saved under initials only, MC. She hasn't called this number in 8 months. The last time was a 2 a.m. conversation. Neither of them ever mentioned again. The kind of call that happens between people who've bled in the same dirt and don't need context to understand each other's silences. She calls it now. It rings twice. If this is a butt dial, comes the voice on the other end. Dry, unimpressed, thick with a faint Texas edge that never quite left even after years overseas. I'm blocking this number. Marisol. Vivi closes her eyes. Just hearing that voice does something to her chest. Loosens something that's been wound tight since the moment Webb walked into that dining room. I need you. A pause. Different now. Sharper. Talk to me. Al-Jarrah's dead. Silence on the line. A long one. She can practically hear Marisol Castillo sitting up straight wherever she is, 3 states away. Whatever quiet civilian life she's built for herself since the discharge suddenly shoved aside in an instant. Define dead. 2 rounds. Turkish border. 6 weeks ago. Vivi keeps her voice level, the way she's trained herself to for years. Flat and procedural even when everything underneath is anything but. His brother's in the States. 90 miles from my father's house as of tonight. And he knows the name Ghost 6. How? Webb said it. Out loud. At my brother's dinner party, a short, humorless laugh escapes her, more exhaustion than actual amusement. In front of half the retired officer corps of Cumberland County. Jesus, Vivi. I know. No. Marisol's voice sharpens further, urgent now. The sound of someone already reaching for car keys, already calculating driving time. You don't know, because you weren't there when they pulled Torres's file 6 months after his discharge. You don't know what these networks do once a name gets loose. It's not just you anymore. It's your team. Every person who ever worked that op. If this brother's got resources and cross-border passport work like that says, he's not just coming for revenge. He's coming for information, compromise, leverage. And revenge is the cheapest, sloppiest reason on that list. Which means it's probably not even the real one. Vivi's hand tightens on the phone. Say that again. You heard me. He's not here for revenge. Maybe he is. Maybe that's part of it. Marisol's voice, all business now, the sound of a soldier snapping into a different gear entirely. But men like that don't spend 4 days quietly crossing a Canadian border and driving 90 miles into small-town North Carolina just to pull a trigger and run. That's not efficient. That's not how it's done. If he's playing a longer game, Vivi, then showing up at that dinner tonight wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Marisol finishes the thought for her, the way she always used to, back when the two of them could finish each other's sentences under fire without even trying. He wanted Webb to say your name out loud. He wanted your family to hear it, which means somebody's been watching that house longer than 4 days. Vivi's blood runs cold because that means somebody has been watching Grant, watching her father, watching every ordinary, unguarded moment of a life this family has spent building since the day she got quietly erased from all of it. There's a memory sitting right behind that fear, uninvited, the way memories tend to surface exactly when a person has no room left for them. Marisol, 3 years ago, sitting beside her on a transport flight home, both of them still half numb from everything that happened in that final deployment, and Marisol saying, quiet, certain, the way she says everything you did the right thing back there. Don't let anybody make you doubt it. Not command, not your family, not even yourself. On the nights it gets hard to remember why. Vivi hadn't believed her, not fully, not for a long time. She's starting, just barely tonight, to believe her now. I'm coming, Marisol says. Not a question, not an offer, a statement of fact, the kind that used to mean orders were already being executed before the sentence even finished. 6 hours, give or take. Don't do anything until I get there. Marisol, 6 hours, Sergeant. The old rank dropped deliberately, gently like an anchor thrown to someone treading water. You held that line once for 11 strangers in a country that isn't even yours. You can hold it for your own family for 6 more hours. I know you can. I watched you do harder things than this. The call ends. Vivi sits there in the dark, phone still warm in her hand, and for the first time all night, lets herself feel the full weight of what's happening. Not fear exactly. She's felt fear before. The real kind, the kind that lives in your body during a mission, and evaporates the second the adrenaline clears. This is different. This is slower, heavier. This is the particular, specific terror of a person who has spent her whole adult life protecting strangers, finally realizing the people she loves most might be the ones in the crosshairs now. She doesn't sleep. She sits by the window instead, watching the dark yard, the old oak tree, the gravel driveway her father's sedan sits parked on, and she thinks about her mother. She doesn't know why. Maybe because grief has a way of stacking on top of fear, pulling old sorrow up along with the new. Maybe because some nights, when everything else in her life feels uncertain, her mother is the one steady thing she still knows how to reach for, even if all that's left of her is memory. She was 15 when it happened. A car accident on I-95, driving up from Fayetteville to visit Holt at a training exercise in Virginia. A drunk driver crossing the median at 11 at night. Quick. Senseless. The kind of death that doesn't come with lessons or meaning. Just absence, sudden and total. The shape of a person's whole presence in the world erased in less time than it takes to finish a sentence. She remembers the exact moment she found out. A knock on the door of a friend's house, where she'd been staying the night. Her father standing there in the porch light, still in uniform, face gone the color of ash, and she'd known instantly, before he even said a word, known the way a body knows a shot has gone wrong before the brain fully catches up. He'd knelt down. She remembers that. A full colonel, decorated, feared by men twice her size, kneeling on a stranger's front porch to be at eye level with his 15-year-old daughter, so he could tell her the worst thing either of them would ever hear. He never fully stood back up after that. Not really. Not the way he used to stand. Her father changed after that. Everyone said so. Neighbors, family friends. The wives of his old unit, who used to bring casseroles and sit with Vivi on the porch, murmuring things like "give him time." Sweetheart, grief does strange things to a man like that meant something. Like there was a formula. A timeline. A moment when the old Holt Hargrove, the one who knelt in tall grass with his daughter, the one who called her his best shot before he ever called Grant anything at all would come back. He never did. Instead, he built walls around himself, around his children, especially around her, though it would take Vivi years and one devastating conversation in a shed tonight to understand exactly why. She reaches into the drawer of the nightstand. There's a small velvet box tucked in the back, the kind she's opened maybe 5 times in 3 years because opening it costs something every single time. Inside, a thin gold chain, a small pendant shaped like a compass rose, worn smooth at the edges from a decade of being touched. Her mother's. Vivi remembers the last time she saw her, wearing it, laughing on the porch. Son catching the gold, calling out something about dinner being ready while Holt and 7-year-old Vivi packed up the rifle range they'd built in the backyard grass. She closes her hand around the pendant now. Doesn't put it on, just holds it, the way she's held it 100 times before, like it's a compass that might actually point her somewhere useful, if she just believes hard enough. It doesn't. It never does. But she holds it anyway, because some nights, that's all a person can do. She thinks, too, about the 11-minute window on that rooftop, about the way time had stretched so long and so strange that afternoon that she'd been able to count the individual breaths of the little girl standing in the doorway behind Al-Jarrah, count them through a scope from 400 yards, close enough to see the way the child kept glancing nervously back into the house like she wasn't supposed to be standing there at all. She thinks about how nobody in that chain of command had wanted to hear about a 9-year-old girl, how the transmission that came back after her abort call had been clipped, annoyed, more concerned with the loss of a strategic opportunity than with the fact that a child's life had just been weighed against a mission objective and, for one soldier at least, come out heavier. She'd never regretted it. Not once. Not on the worst nights, not during the discharge hearing, where a room full of men who'd never once looked through that scope questioned her judgment, her discipline, her fitness to serve. She regrets now only the silence that followed, the years of her own father believing a lie instead of a truth that would have cost her nothing to tell him, except for the small, sworn, unbreakable promise that had kept her quiet in the first place. Some promises cost more than people realize when they make them. Morning comes gray and quiet, fog sitting low over the yard the way it sometimes does in early spring, softening the edges of everything, making the whole world look like it hasn't quite decided to be awake yet. Vivi finds her father in the kitchen at 5:30, already dressed, already alert, a cup of black coffee steaming untouched in front of him. He doesn't look like he slept either. Grant's not answering his phone, he says before she's even fully through the door. He left for his apartment near base around midnight. Says he needed space after everything. That's fair. Fair doesn't matter right now. Holt's jaw is tight, the muscles working the way they do when he's forcing himself to stay calm through sheer discipline and of actual calm. I need to know he's safe. And I don't. He stops. Starts again, and something in his voice breaks just slightly, just enough for her to hear it. I don't know how to protect him from something I don't understand. Vivi sits down across from him. Slowly, careful, the way she'd approach an animal that's been wounded and doesn't yet trust that the hand reaching toward it means help. Then let me teach you, she says. Quiet. The way you once taught me. Something moves across her father's face. Complicated. Grief and pride and shame all tangled together in a way that would probably take him another 30 years to fully untangle, if he ever managed it at all. "I owe you an apology," he says. The words come out stiff, unpracticed, like a language he hasn't spoken in years and is relearning in real time. "Not just for last night. Dad, let me finish." His hands wrapped tighter around the coffee mug, knuckles going pale. "After your mother died, I made a decision about you. I never told you what it was, and I should have. Years ago. Before it cost us," he gestures vaguely between them, encompassing 3 years of silence, of paper targets jokes, of "don't embarrass us." "Before it cost us this." Vivi goes very still. "What decision?" Holt exhales, long, like he's been holding this breath since the day her mother's car crossed that median. "There was a program," he says slowly. "Advanced sniper qualification, inter-service. Highly selective, maybe 6 slots a year, nationwide. Your name came up. Early. Before you'd even finished basic. Somebody flagged your marksmanship scores and pushed you forward without you knowing. I never heard about any program. Because I made a call." He meets her eyes now, steady, forcing himself to hold her gaze, even though every part of him looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I knew people. Old connections from my own service," I asked quietly. "Off the books for your name to be pulled from consideration." The kitchen goes very silent. Somewhere outside, a bird starts up, oblivious, cheerful, completely wrong for the moment. "You what?" Vivi says. Voice flat. Dangerously flat. "I couldn't lose you too." Holt's voice cracks fully now. No discipline left to hold it together. "Your mother was gone 8 months. 8 months, Vivi. And then I get a call telling me my 19-year-old daughter's been flagged for one of the most dangerous specialty tracks in the whole military. Advanced sniper selection has a fatality and injury rate that would make you sick. I'd buried enough people by then. I couldn't." His voice breaks entirely. "I could not bury you too." Vivi sits there, stunned, the whole architecture of the last decade rearranging itself in real time inside her chest. "So you pulled strings," she says slowly, piecing it together as she speaks. "To keep me out of a program I never even knew I qualified for." "Yes. And then you spent years acting like I wasn't good enough to have made it anyway." Silence. "Because it was easier," Holt says finally, voice barely above a whisper, "than telling you the truth. Easier to let you think you weren't chosen than to admit I was the reason you weren't there. Easier to watch you struggle to prove yourself to me than to admit I was the one standing in your way the whole time." Vivi feels something crack open in her chest, not anger exactly, though there's plenty of that mixed in. Grief, mostly, for the years, for the misunderstanding, for every single "don't embarrass us" that it actually meant. Underneath, "Please don't disappear too." "You know what the worst part is," she says quietly. "I joined anyway. Found my own way into a program just as dangerous. Just without your permission this time. And for 3 years you've thought I failed at it. When really," her voice catches, "really I was better at it than either of us ever imagined I could be. I know that now, do you?" She stands, pushing her chair back, needing suddenly to move, to pace, to do anything with the enormous, aching weight sitting in her chest. "Because it took Marcus Webb showing up at Ed Grant's dinner party for you to actually ask." "I know." Holt doesn't defend himself, doesn't offer excuses, just sits there absorbing it, the way she absorbed his paper targets joke last night, quietly, completely, letting it land without flinching away. "I have spent 30 years being the kind of man who gives orders instead of asking questions. It cost me your mother's last good years, if I'm honest with myself. It's costing me you right now. I don't know how to be different, Vivienne, but I am asking you to teach me. Because I would rather learn late than lose what's left." For a long moment, neither of them speaks. She thinks about telling him, right then, about the rooftop, about the 11-minute window and the little girl in the doorway, about the promise that kept her quiet for 3 years, and the particular loneliness of being punished by your own family for a mercy nobody but a handful of strangers ever knew you'd shown. She doesn't tell him yet. Some wounds need to be approached slowly, the way you'd approach a trigger with a hair-fine pull too much pressure too fast, and the whole thing goes off wrong. Outside, The fog is starting to lift, thin gray light bleeding slowly gold across the yard, across the old oak tree, across a driveway that Vivi suddenly notices, gaze sharpening on instinct alone, has fresh tire tracks in the gravel that don't belong to either of their cars. Dad. Something in her voice must carry, because Holt's head snaps up instantly. 30 years of command reflex overriding 30 seconds of vulnerability in a single heartbeat. What? Don't move. She's already crossing to the window, careful to stay back from the glass, angling her view without exposing herself to it. Old habits reasserting themselves with terrifying speed. There are tire tracks by the mailbox. Fresh. Not ours. Holt is beside her in an instant, all grief instantly rerouted into focus. And for just a moment, one strange electric moment, they are not father and daughter working through 30 years of silence. They are two soldiers, assessing a threat. Together, delivery truck, Holt offers, though his voice doesn't sound convinced even to himself. Neighbor's landscaper, could be anything. Could be. Vivi's eyes track the tree line at the edge of the property, the thin strip of woods separating the Hargrove land from the road, searching for movement, for the wrong kind of stillness, for anything out of place. But Webb said, this man has resources, cross-border passport work, which means he doesn't drive up in a truck with a magnet sign on the door. Her phone buzzes. Marisol, 2 hours out. You good? Vivi's thumb hovers over the screen. She thinks about lying. Thinks about the easy reflexive habit of saying yes, I'm fine, the same lie she's told herself for 3 years straight. She doesn't lie. Vivi, found fresh tracks near the house. Might be nothing. Might not be. Hurry. The reply comes back in seconds. Marisol, on it. Don't engage alone. Vivi looks up from her phone to find her father watching her. Really watching her, not with suspicion, not with disappointment, but with something new. Something that looks, unmistakably, like respect. Who was that? He asks. Marisol Castillo, served with me overseas. She's coming. Good. Holt nods once, decisive, the old command instinct clicking fully back into place. Then let's get Grant on the phone, now. And after that he pauses, jaw tight. After that, you're going to tell me everything. Every mission, every name, every reason you've spent 3 years carrying this alone. Because I am done being the last person in this family to find things out. Grant answers on the 4th ring, groggy, half annoyed, until Holt's tone registers and something in his voice sharpens instantly. Yes, he's fine. Yes, his apartment's locked. No, he hasn't noticed anything strange. Yes, he'll stay put until somebody comes for him. Somebody's coming for you within the hour, Holt says, already reaching for his keys. Don't leave. Don't let anyone in you don't recognize. I mean that, Grant. Dad, you're scaring me. Good. Holt's voice doesn't soften. Scared keeps you careful. I'll explain everything when we're all together. I promise you that. He ends the call. Looks at his daughter, and for a moment, there's something almost like an apology in his face for the years he spent giving orders instead of asking questions, an apology he doesn't have words for yet, but that she reads clearly anyway, the way she's always been able to read the weather behind her father's eyes. Vivi almost smiles. Almost. It's a strange, aching feeling, standing in her childhood kitchen at dawn with fresh tire tracks in the driveway, and a father who for the first time in longer than she can remember sounds like he actually wants to know her. Okay, she says. But you're not going to like all of it. I don't need to like it. Holt's hand, weathered, scarred across the knuckles the way it's been since she was 7 years old, kneeling in tall grass beside him, reaches out. Rests, briefly, on her shoulder. A gesture so small, so simple, and yet so entirely unfamiliar between them that it nearly undoes her. I just need to finally understand who my daughter actually is. 28 years too late might still be better than never. Outside, the fog continues lifting off the yard. And somewhere, 90 miles away, or maybe, if that tire track means what she fears it means, somewhere much, much closer than that, a man who lost his brother 6 weeks ago is still out there, watching, waiting, working his way, patiently, methodically, toward the exact center of everything Vivi has left in this world. She doesn't know yet how close he already is. She doesn't know yet that the man who left those tracks wasn't hunting at all, was standing at the edge of these woods before dawn. For reasons she can't begin to guess. Reasons that will take 3 more days and a small town's worth of danger to fully understand. But some part of her, the part trained over years of overwatch and stillness, and reading a landscape for the wrongness hidden inside it, already senses something moving beneath the surface of all of this. Something bigger than one grieving brother. Something that reaches, quiet and patient, into rooms this family has always trusted completely. The quiet before this is over. It isn't peace. It's just the held breath before the shot. Marisol Castillo pulls into the Hargrove driveway at 6:52 in the morning, tires crunching hard over gravel, driving a truck that looks like it survived worse roads than this one. She's out of the cab before the engine even finishes ticking down, duffel bag already slung over one shoulder, eyes already scanning the tree line the way Vivi's are. Because that's what this unit does, even 3 years out. Even in civilian clothes, in a stranger's front yard, in a town that still thinks war ended the day they came home. Vivi is on the porch before Marisol's boots hit the ground, and for one full second, neither of them says anything at all. They just look at each other, really look, the way people do when the last time they stood face to face was under circumstances neither of them talks about with anyone else. Then Marisol's mouth twitches, almost a smile, almost. "You look like hell, Sergeant. You drove 6 hours in a truck that smells like an ashtray to tell me that." 5.5. Marisol closes the distance, pulls her into a hug so brief and fierce it's over before Vivi's arms even finish rising to return it. "Now show me." 'Cause that's Marisol. No warm-up, no easing in. Straight to the wound every time, the way a medic doesn't waste breath asking if it hurts before pressing down on the bleeding. "Show me," Marisol says again. No hello. No small talk. Straight to business, the way she's always been. The way that used to drive half their old team crazy and the other half grateful. Vivi leads her to the mailbox. Points. Marisol crouches, studies the tread pattern in the dirt without touching it. Frowns. Not a delivery truck. Her voice is flat, certain. Wheelbase is too narrow. And look here. She gestures at a second, fainter set of prints, boot prints, angled toward the tree line and back again. Somebody parked, got out, walked to that ridge, watched the house, then left. How long ago? Hours, maybe. Dews settled into the print edges. Marisol stands, brushing dirt from her knees, eyes hard now. Whoever it was, they weren't sloppy. Which means they weren't some kid inheriting a hunting rifle and a grudge. This was somebody who's done this before. Vivi feels the cold certainty settle into her chest. The same certainty she used to feel right before a mission went from routine to something else entirely. That particular drop in her stomach, the one that used to mean somebody's about to bleed, has never fully gone away no matter how many peaceful mornings she's spent trying to convince her body otherwise. So he's already been here, she says, or somebody working for him. Marisol's eyes flick toward the house, toward the second-floor window, where Holt is watching them from behind the curtain, not even pretending not to, which raises the question that should be keeping all of us up at night. What's that? How'd he find this address so fast? Marisol's jaw tightens. Vivi, 4 days since he crossed the border. 4 days, and he's already got eyes on your father's house. That's not luck. That's not even good tradecraft. That's somebody feeding him information. The word lands heavy between them. Informant. Because if there's a leak, it isn't coming from strangers. It's coming from somewhere close. Somewhere trusted. Somewhere inside the exact circle of people who are supposed to be safe. Marisol crouches back down, examines the boot print more closely, measuring the length against her own boot with a practiced eye. 9.5, she murmurs. Not a big man, careful walker. He came alone, or whoever this was came alone. She stands again. One more thing. Look at the angle of approach. He didn't walk in from the road, came through the neighbor's field, cut across at the fence line there. She points, and Vivi follows the line of her finger to a sagging section of wire fence, 100 yards off. That's not the approach of a stranger. That's the approach of somebody who already knew the terrain. somebody who'd studied a satellite image, or somebody who's been here before, on foot, in daylight, without anybody thinking twice about it. Vivi's mind runs through every delivery, every contractor, every casual visitor who's crossed this property in the last year, and comes up with nothing solid enough to hold on to, which is its own kind of terrifying, the realization that the enemy might not look like an enemy at all, might look like somebody you'd wave to from the porch without a second thought. Holt insists on being part of the conversation, insists, with the particular stubbornness of a man who has spent 30 years giving orders and does not know how to simply receive them, that whatever happens next happens in his house, at his table, with him fully informed. Vivi doesn't argue. There's no point anymore. Something shifted between them last night in that kitchen, something fragile and new, and she's not about to test its edges by shutting him out now. They sit around the same dining table where, 24 hours ago, her father called her not built for it in front of 40 strangers. The tablecloth's been changed. The chandelier still glows amber overhead, but everything else about this room feels different now, quieter, tighter, stripped of performance. Even the light seems to fall differently, less golden, more clinical, the way a room looks different once you know it's been watched. Marisol lays out a laptop, pulls up a satellite map of Cumberland County, red pins already dotting 3 locations. Al-Jarrah's brother is named Karim, she says. Former logistics coordinator, not military, mostly worked supply routes for the network his brother ran. Smart. Careful, not the profile of a man who does his own wet work. Meaning what? Holt asks. Meaning if there's a shooter involved, it's probably not him personally. Marisol's eyes flick to Vivi, which tells me he's not here alone. Somebody's helping him. Resources, transportation, intel on a family living under an assumed level of obscurity in rural North Carolina. That's not something one grieving brother pulls off with a laptop and a grudge. Grant, finally home, finally briefed, sits at the far end of the table, looking like a man watching his entire understanding of his family collapse and rebuild itself in real time. He hasn't said much all morning, just listens, absorbs. Every so often his eyes drift toward his sister with something that looks less like shock now and more like awe. He clears his throat once, quiet, unsure if he's allowed to ask questions in a conversation this far above his clearance level. Can I say something? He finally manages. Go ahead, Vivi says. I keep thinking about... Starts again. All those years, I used to hear Dad talk about you like you'd let the family down, and I never questioned it. Not once. I just believed it. Because he said it, and he's Dad, and Dad doesn't say things he doesn't mean. His voice cracks slightly. I'm sorry. I should have asked you myself instead of just believing whatever version of you I was handed. Vivi reaches across the table, squeezes his hand once. You were a kid, Grant. You believed what you were told. That's not a crime. Feels like one right now. It's not, Holt says, quiet, firm, cutting in with something that sounds almost like an order, but lands more like an apology aimed at both his children at once. If anybody in this room owes an apology for that particular lie, it's me, not you. Nobody answers right away, because the answer, when it finally surfaces 2 hours later, is going to break something in this family that took 30 years to build. Webb arrives at 9, grim-faced, carrying a manila folder he sets on the table like it weighs more than paper should. Financial records, he says. Legally gray to have pulled this fast, so we're not going to discuss how I got them. He glances at Holt. You're not going to like what's in here. Holt's jaw sets. Show me. Webb opens the folder, slides 3 pages across the table. Bank transfers. Offshore. Small at first, a few $1,000s. 18 months ago, then larger. Much larger. 6 figures. Moving in increments designed to stay just under the threshold that triggers automatic reporting. Whose account, Holt asks. Though something in his voice says he already suspects, already knows, is just praying quietly, desperately, to be wrong. Webb doesn't answer with words. He just turns the last page around. Holt goes white, because the name at the top of that account isn't a stranger's. It's Dale Pruitt's. Colonel Dale Pruitt, retired. Holt's closest friend for over 20 years. Best man at his wedding. The man who sat with Holt on this exact porch the week after Vivi's mother died, saying nothing, just present, just there, the way only real friends know how to be. The man who was at that dinner party last night, laughing, toasting Grant, patting Holt on the back like family. The man whose scotch bottle still sits, half empty, on the sideboard by the door, a small ordinary object suddenly rendered unbearable by everything it now represents. No, Holt says. Quiet, almost pleading. There has to be another explanation. There's an explanation, Marisol says, gentler now than Vivi's ever heard her. Gambling debt. Serious. He's been in trouble for 2 years, a bookmaker connection out of Charlotte, escalating fast. Somebody found that vulnerability and used it. She hesitates. Somebody good at finding exactly the right kind of desperate person to exploit. Holt sits very still. Vivi watches something break behind her father's eyes, an old certainty, crumbling in real time, the belief that loyalty, once earned, stays earned. That the men who fought beside you stay beside you forever, immune to the ordinary corrosions that eat away at everyone else. He knew about Grant's dinner, Holt says slowly, working through it out loud, piecing together a betrayal one devastating fact at a time. He knew the guest list, the schedule, everything. He's known your family's movements for months, Webb confirms, which means whoever's running this operation didn't need to surveil your house directly at all. Not when they had somebody handing them the itinerary. Grant's hands curl into fists on the table. That son of a... Grant. Holt's voice, sharp, cuts him off, not out of discipline this time, but out of something rawer. Grief, maybe, or shame. That a man he trusted with 30 years of friendship turned out to be exactly the crack that let danger walk right up to his family's door. Vivi watches her father in that moment, and something shifts in her chest, because she spent 3 years believing he'd chosen silence over her out of coldness, out of disappointment, out of some failure in her he simply couldn't forgive. But watching him now, watching him absorb the specific horror of being betrayed by the person he trusted most, she understands something new about him. About how much this man's whole life has been built on a code so rigid, so absolute, that any crack in it doesn't just hurt him, it unmakes him. I sat with him at your mother's funeral, Holt says, almost to himself now, voice distant, staring at the folder like it might rearrange itself into something less true if he looks hard enough. Held me together that day. Told me things I never told another living soul. His hand trembles slightly against the table. And the whole time, apparently, he can't finish the sentence. Doesn't need to. There's more, Marisol says quietly. Reluctant, like she knows this next part costs something. The transfers trace back through 3 shell accounts before they dead-end at a private security contractor. Voss Dynamic. Desmond Voss. Webb's face darkens. I know that name. So do I. Marisol's voice hardens. Small private military contractor. Officially decommissioned 4 years ago after a weapons diversion scandal. Nobody could ever quite pin on him. Officially, he's retired. Unofficially, she taps the folder. I think Voss has been running an arms pipeline through the same region Al-Jarrah used to operate in. Which means Al-Jarrah wasn't just a target of opportunity 6 weeks ago. He was a loose end. Vivi finishes, ice settling into her stomach. And you're the next one, Marisol says, quiet. Final. The last surviving operator from that mission who could ever credibly testify to what really happened out there. If Voss thinks you're a threat to whatever he's still running, she doesn't need to finish the sentence. The room sits in silence a long moment, the weight of it pressing down on all of them. Holt's fresh grief, Grant's fear, Vivi's slow, dawning understanding that this was never really about a grieving brother's revenge at all. It's about somebody erasing evidence. And Kareem Al-Jarrah, whatever his intentions, might be nothing more than a man standing in the blast radius of a much bigger fire. Webb clears his throat the way he does when he's about to shift a room from grief into strategy. An old habit from 100 briefing tents. There's a Veterans Appreciation event Saturday. Town Square. I'm told the whole family's expected to attend. We were, Holt says, distant still. I don't know if that's wise now. It might be exactly what we need. Webb straightens. If Voss's people are watching for an opening, A public event with fixed timing gives us something we don't currently have: predictability. We can work with predictability. You want to use my son as bait, Holt says. Flat. Dangerous. I want to use a controlled environment we can actually secure. Webb corrects. Gentle but firm. The alternative is waiting for them to choose the time and place themselves. I don't love either option, Holt, but I trust one of them more than the other. Nobody speaks for a long moment. Vivi watches her father's jaw work, watches him run the calculation the way he must have run 1,000 tactical calculations across 30 years of service, weighing risk against risk, danger against danger, looking for the version of this that costs his family the least. Fine, he says finally, quiet, resigned. But it's done exactly the way Vivi says it's done. She has more relevant experience in this room than any of us. It's such a small sentence. 6 words, maybe 7, but Vivi feels them land in her chest like something enormous, something that 30 years of silence never once allowed her father to say out loud. The town of Fayetteville holds its Veterans Appreciation Day the following Saturday. Every year, without fail, rain or shine, for as long as Vivi can remember, a parade down Hay Street, a ceremony in the town square, a stage where a handful of local dignitaries and decorated veterans get called up to be thanked by a community that means it, even if half the specifics of what they're thanking people for stay quietly unspoken. This year, Grant is scheduled to be recognized. New lieutenant, 3rd-generation Hargrove, hometown boy in uniform. Holt is scheduled to speak an honor he's held for over a decade, a tradition nobody in this family imagined breaking, which is exactly the problem. We cancel, Grant says, the morning of, pacing the kitchen like a man trying to walk off nerves that have nowhere else to go. We tell the organizers something came up. We don't hand this guy, whoever he is, whatever he wants, an entire town square full of civilians to hide inside. We can't cancel. Holt's voice, steady now, the old command tone returned but tempered with something new, something that sounds, for the first time in a long while, like he's asking for agreement rather than simply issuing an order. If we pull out now, we lose the one advantage we actually have, which is control of the terrain. Vivi answers before her father can, old instinct, old training snapping into place with terrifying ease. If we cancel, they regroup, find another angle, another opening, someplace we don't control, don't know, can't prepare for. But if we go forward carefully, with eyes on every entrance, with a team that knows exactly what to look for, we choose the battlefield. Holt finishes, looking at his daughter with something unmistakable now. Not doubt, not disappointment, respect. Webb runs point on the security logistics, calling in 2 off-duty MPs from Fort Liberty as quiet backup, positioned in plain clothes at either end of the square. Morrisall scouts the rooftops the night before, methodical, checking sight lines the way she used to check them before every high-value movement overseas, radioing back measurements and angles in a low, steady voice that makes the whole operation feel, for a moment, like something the two of them have done 100 times together instead of something they've been forced back into after 3 years of trying to leave it behind. Southwest Corner's got the cleanest sightline to the stage. Marisol reports, standing on the flat roof of the old hardware store with a rangefinder in hand, the town spread out gold and quiet beneath a lowering sun. If I were setting up a shot, that's where I'd go. Then that's where I'll be, Vivi says. Figured you'd say that. They stand there a moment longer, side by side, looking out over the square where tomorrow this town will gather to wave flags and thank strangers for a service most of them will never fully understand. Morrisall bumps her shoulder against Vivi's, gentle, wordless. You good? She asks. Not really a question. More like a check, the kind partners run on each other before something dangerous, a way of saying I see you without having to say anything that's soft out loud. No, Vivi admits, but I will be. Tomorrow when it matters. That's usually how it works. Marisol's mouth quirks, almost fond. Nobody's ever ready. You just show up steady enough to fake it until your hands remember what to do. Vivi spends the morning of the event doing something she hasn't done in 3 years. She opens the box in her closet. Inside a compact rifle case, government surplus gray. Dust settled thin across the latch. She sets it on the bed, stares at it a long moment. Because opening this case means something. Means stepping back into a version of herself she was ordered to bury. Means undoing 3 years of careful, deliberate forgetting in the space of a single click. Except there's no version of today that doesn't require exactly that. Her hand hovers over the latch, hesitates. And in that hesitation, a whole flood of memory rushes up at once, the weight of this exact case on her shoulder. Crossing a tarmac at 2 in the morning, the particular quiet of a team moving together in the dark, the 11 minutes on that rooftop that changed the shape of the rest of her life. She thinks, too, of her father's hands guiding hers around a rifle, 3 sizes too big for a 7-year-old, the smell of pine and gun oil, the sound of her mother's laugh drifting up from a porch that doesn't exist in quite the same way anymore. Every version of herself she's ever been is somehow contained in this small gray case. She opens it. The rifle inside gleams dull black under the bedroom light, familiar as an old friend, heavier and lighter at the same time. Then she remembers, heavier in her hands, lighter in her chest, like some weight she's been carrying finally has somewhere useful to go. She assembles it in under 90 seconds. Muscle memory doesn't forget, even when everything else tries to. Downstairs, Holt is waiting by the door in his good suit, the one he wears every year for this exact ceremony. He watches her come down the stairs, rifle case in hand, and for a moment, neither of them says anything at all. "You're not going to be up on that stage with me," he says finally. Not a question. An observation, tinged with something that might be regret. "No." Vivi meets his eyes steady. "I'm going to be somewhere nobody can see me, making sure you and Grant both walk off that stage tonight." Holt is quiet a long moment. "Your mother would have hated this," he says finally. Quiet, rough, all of it. The danger, the secrecy. "She always said the two of us." His voice catches. "She always said we were cut from the same stubborn cloth, too willing to walk toward the fire instead of away from it." "Maybe that's not a flaw, Dad." Vivi shifts the rifle case in her hands. "Maybe that's just what it looks like to actually protect the people you love, instead of just talking about it." Something in Holt's face breaks open, gentle, unguarded, the same rare, unguarded look she remembers from 21 years ago in tall grass by the river. "I'm proud of you," he says. Simple, direct, no qualifiers, no deflection, no paper targets, joke lurking underneath to soften the impact. "I should have said it years ago. I'm saying it now." Vivi doesn't trust her voice enough to answer. She just nods, presses her lips together, walks past him out the door before the tears sitting hot behind her eyes have the chance to fall, because there isn't time for that right now. There will be time later. She has to believe that, has to believe there's a later at all. The town square fills by noon, flags snapping in a light breeze, a brass band running through a slightly off-key rendition of the national anthem, children weaving between lawn chairs, balloons bobbing, the whole ordinary, beautiful chaos of small-town American life going on exactly the way it's supposed to, exactly the way it deserves to, oblivious to the quiet machinery of protection working invisibly around its edges. Vivi takes position on the roof of the old hardware store, 200 yards from the stage, angle clean across the whole square. She lies flat, settling into the position the same way she settled onto that range 4 mornings ago. Bones taking the weight the way her father taught her, muscles staying loose and ready underneath. Marisol's voice crackles low through a hidden earpiece, calm, professional, the two of them slipping instantly back into a rhythm neither has used in 3 years. "Eyes on the northeast corner," Marisol says. "Guy in the gray jacket, been standing still 11 minutes. Not clapping, not talking, just watching the stage." Vivi adjusts her scope, finds him. A man, mid-30s maybe, olive-skinned, dark eyes fixed with an intensity that doesn't match the festive noise around him. Something about him doesn't read as a shooter. He's not scanning exits, not positioning near cover. He's just standing there, hands visibly empty, staring at the stage like a man working up the courage to do something he's terrified of. "That's not our threat," Vivi murmurs. Watch his hands. No concealment, no positioning. He's not here to shoot anybody. Then who is he? I think, Vivi says slowly, ice creeping down her spine as a different piece finally clicks into place. That's Kareem. Down below, invisible from her angle now, an MP in plain clothes drifts closer to the man in the gray jacket, unhurried, casual, a coffee cup in hand like any other festival goer. Vivi watches through her scope as words are exchanged, brief, tense. The man in gray raising his empty hands slightly. Palms out, a universal gesture of I'm not a threat that seems to be landing, at least for now, at least long enough to buy time. The ceremony begins at 1. Local dignitaries take turns at the podium. The mayor speaks. A representative from the VFW speaks. Grant is called up first, and Vivi watches through her scope as her little brother stands tall in his dress uniform, cheeks flushed with the same nervous pride he wore at his own dinner party a week ago, oblivious to everything moving in the shadows around him. Then Holt steps up. He clears his throat, looks out over the crowd, and for a long moment, he doesn't say the speech he's given a version of for the last 10 years straight. I want to talk about something different this year, he says instead. His voice carries steady over the square, but Vivi, even from 200 yards, even through a scope, can hear something new trembling underneath it. About a soldier in my own family I failed to honor. For a long time. The crowd stills. Not confused exactly, just attentive, sensing something unscripted unfolding in real time. I have a daughter, Holt continues. Served 2 years in a classified Overwatch capacity overseas. Saved 11 lives on a single mission most of you will never be allowed to hear the details of. And I spent 3 years letting people believe she'd failed. Because the truth was easier for me to carry as a lie than to admit how much I didn't understand about my own child. Vivi's throat tightens. Her hands, steady on the rifle, betray nothing. But inside her chest, something enormous is cracking open. I used to think being a good father meant keeping my children safe from everything. Holt goes on, voice thickening now. No longer performing for a crowd, but simply speaking, plain and unguarded, the way he hasn't spoken in public in 30 years. I made choices, years ago, that I told myself were about safety. Turns out some of those choices just kept the people I love the most at arm's length instead. I'm not proud of that. But I'm learning, late maybe. Better late than never, I hope. She's here today, Holt says. Voice thick now, unmistakably emotional. 30 years of discipline cracking wide open in front of a town square full of people who have never once seen this man show anything but iron composure. Somewhere, doing exactly what she's always done. Protecting this family, whether we deserved it or not. And that's the exact moment Vivi's scope catches movement on the rooftop across the square. A second man. Different from Kareem, entirely tactical positioning, low profile, a rifle case she recognizes instantly by silhouette alone, angled toward the stage, toward Grant. Contact, Vivi breathes, every ounce of emotion instantly, ruthlessly rerouted into pure, cold focus. Rooftop, southwest corner, opposite the bakery. Armed, positioned on Grant. I see him. Marisol's voice, sharp now, urgent. MPs are too far. You've got the only clean angle, Vivi. Time slows the way it always used to on mission. Vivi's breath goes shallow, controlled. The pocket between heartbeats opening up in front of her like it always has. Like it's been waiting 3 patient years for exactly this moment. Her finger finds the trigger. Her mind runs the calculation automatically. Instantly wind, distance, elevation. The precise fraction of a second she has before that shooter's own finger finds its mark. She doesn't think about her father's speech. Doesn't think about paper targets. About don't embarrass us. About 30 years of silence finally cracking open on a stage 200 yards away. She thinks about one thing only. Her brother is standing in the crosshairs of a man who came here to erase him. She fires. The shot cracks across the square, swallowed almost entirely by the brass band's off-key final note, and 200 yards away, the shooter's rifle jerks sideways, torn out of alignment a fraction of a second before his own finger completes its motion. His round goes wild, cracking into the bakery's brick facade instead of Grant's chest, and chaos erupts through the crowd in an instant, screaming, scattering, the beautiful ordinary chaos of small-town life shattering into something else entirely. Vivi is already moving. Down the fire escape, across the alley, sprinting the 200 yards with a speed that hasn't left her body no matter how many years she spent trying to convince herself it had. Her lungs burn. Her heart hammers so hard she can feel it in her teeth. Somewhere behind her, distant, she can hear the crowd still screaming, still scattering, and beneath all of it one thought running on a loop, sharp and relentless. Grant, Grant. Please let him be okay. By the time she reaches the rooftop, Marisol's already there, MPs closing fast from the other direction. The shooter, wounded, disarmed, pinned beneath Marisol's knee against the gravel roof, snarls something unintelligible in pain and fury. Vivi looks down at him, recognizes nothing about his face. A stranger, a professional. Somebody's hired hand following somebody else's orders, exactly the way Marisol predicted all along. Who sent you? She demands. He says nothing, just glares, jaw clenched. The particular defiant silence of a man who's been paid enough to keep his mouth shut even now. Behind her, footsteps on the fire escape. Vivi turns, instinct flaring, and finds herself face to face with the man from the northeast corner. Kareem. He's out of breath. Hands raised, open, unmistakably empty. His eyes, dark and wet, find hers with an intensity that makes her chest ache before he even speaks. I tried to reach you, he says, accented, urgent words tumbling out fast. For days. I have been trying. I am not the danger here, please. You must believe me. Convince me. My brother, Kareem said, voice cracking, was not a good man. I know this. I knew this even before Freya died. But the men he worked for, the men who killed him, they are the ones who sent this. He gestures, shaking, toward the pinned shooter. I came to warn you, not to hunt you. I came because I heard the name you carry, Ghost 6, and I remembered. My brother told me once, before everything, that a soldier had a clean shot at him and chose not to take it, because my niece was standing behind him. His voice breaks entirely. You spared her life that day, even though sparing his cost you everything. I could not let Voss erase the one person who ever showed my family mercy in the middle of all that horror. Vivi stands there, breath ragged, heart still hammering from the shot, from the sprint, from 30 seconds that felt like they lasted a lifetime, and feels something inside her chest. Finally, quietly, break open, because for 3 years she believed that decision cost her everything and saved nothing. Believed the mercy she showed a stranger's family evaporated. The second Al-Jarrah's brother came looking for her. Except it didn't evaporate. It planted something, grew quietly, in the heart of a grieving man who could have hunted her for revenge and chose, instead, to hunt down the truth to protect her. Thank you, she says. Simple, genuine, the only words that feel big enough for the moment and small enough to actually say out loud. Kareem nods, wordless, tears finally spilling down his face. 3 years of grief and fear and impossible moral weight, finally, briefly, set down. Below, in the square, the chaos is already resolving into something more manageable. Police cordoning off the perimeter, EMTs moving through the crowd checking for injuries. A low murmur of confusion and relief spreading through the townspeople in equal measure. Vivi spots her father from the rooftop, pushing through the crowd with a speed she's never seen from him, Grant beside him, both of them alive, both of them unharmed, both of them scanning the crowd frantically for a face they need to see. Her face. She doesn't wait for permission, doesn't wait to be found. She's down the fire escape and through the crowd before either of them spots her. And when Grant finally does, when his eyes land on his sister, alive, steady, walking toward him through the wreckage of a day that almost ended so much worse than it did, he doesn't say a word. He just runs to her, wraps his arms around her so tight it nearly knocks the wind out of her, shaking, the adrenaline finally catching up to a 23-year-old who came within a single bullet's width of dying in front of his hometown. You saved my life, he says, muffled against her shoulder, voice cracking. Vivi, you actually saved my life. That's what I do, she says, quiet, holding him just as tight. That's what I've always done. I just wasn't allowed to tell anybody about it before. Holt reaches them a moment later, and for the first time in longer than Vivi can remember, her father doesn't hesitate, doesn't hold back. He pulls both his children into his arms at once, right there in the middle of the chaos. Uniform pressed against uniform against sundress. And for a long moment, none of them say anything at all. Because some moments don't need words. They just need to be survived, together out loud, in the open, where nobody has to pretend anymore. The aftermath moves fast and slow all at once. The particular disorienting rhythm of a crisis resolving into paperwork and statements, and the strange banality of cleanup after chaos. Dale Pruitt is arrested 2 days later, quietly, without fanfare, his decades of friendship with Holt dissolving into federal charges and a story the local paper runs on page 4 instead of page 1, because some betrayals are too small and too human to make headlines even when they nearly get somebody killed. Holt doesn't attend the arraignment, can't bring himself to. Instead, he sits in his study for 3 days, mostly silent, grieving a friendship that turned out to have a rot at its center nobody could see from the outside. Vivi finds him there on the 3rd night, lamp low, an old photograph of the two of them young, laughing, decades before any of this resting in his lap. He held my hand at her funeral, Holt says, without looking up. 28 years of friendship. I would have trusted that man with my life. I did trust him with my life. More than once. That's not a flaw in you, Dad. Vivi sits beside him, gentle, careful. That's just what it costs to actually let people in. Sometimes you get burned. Doesn't mean you were wrong to try. Feels like it does. It's not. She takes the photograph from his hands, sets it face down on the table, not to erase it, just to give him permission to look away for a moment. You know what I learned overseas? The people who never let anybody close never get betrayed. They also never get loved. I'd rather have both, Dad, even with all the risk that comes with it. Holt looks at his daughter for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them, 30 years of distance folding down into something smaller and more survivable. When did you get so wise? He says finally, voice rough. Had a good teacher, she says. Once. A long time ago. By a river. Something breaks open in Holt's face, grief and gratitude tangled together, and he reaches for his daughter's hand and holds it, simply, without a word, for a long time. Desmond Voss's operation unravels slower, methodically, federal agencies picking apart 4 years of quietly rebuilt arms trafficking with the patient thoroughness of people who've been waiting a long time for exactly this kind of break. Webb tells Vivi, weeks later, over coffee, that her testimony carefully declassified, carefully redacted, became the linchpin of the entire case. That the mercy she showed 3 years ago, the decision that cost her a career and nearly her family, turned out to be the very thing that ultimately brought down a man who'd been quietly arming 6 conflicts for the better part of a decade. You know what the strange part is, Webb says, stirring his coffee slowly, eyes distant. If you'd taken that shot 3 years ago, if you'd killed Al-Jarrah, the moment you had him, none of this ever comes to light. Voss keeps operating, keeps arming men who hurt more children than the one you spared that day. Your mercy wasn't just personal, Vivi. It was the first domino. Vivi sits with that a long moment, feeling something settle in her chest that's been unsettled for 3 straight years. I didn't know that when I made the call, she says quietly. Nobody ever does, Webb says. That's the whole terrible, beautiful thing about doing the right thing in the moment. You rarely get to see where it leads. You just have to trust that it matters anyway. Kareem goes home, eventually, with his niece, the same little girl Vivi once spared a bullet's width away from tragedy. Now 9 years old, safe alive, entirely unaware of how close she once came to losing everything twice over. Before he leaves, he finds Vivi one last time. Presses something small into her hand, a photograph, worn soft at the edges, of a little girl laughing on a swing set somewhere far from here. She does not know your name, he says quietly. She does not know what you did, but I will tell her one day, when she is old enough to understand what mercy actually costs the person who gives it. Vivi holds the photograph a long moment after he's gone. Doesn't cry, just holds it, the way she's held her mother's pendant 100 times before. Like proof that some choices, the hardest ones, the ones that cost everything at the time, end up mattering more than anyone could have known. The town holds a smaller ceremony 3 weeks later. Quieter. No brass band this time, no balloons. Just the town square on an ordinary Tuesday evening. A modest crowd gathered because word travels fast in a place like Fayetteville, and everyone wants to be there for whatever this is. Ruth Ann Delgado is there, front row, dressed in her Sunday best, dabbing at her eyes before the ceremonies even started. Marisol stands near the back, arms crossed, deliberately unshowy, though the pride on her face is unmistakable even from a distance. Webb stands at the podium. Behind him, a small plaque, freshly unveiled, mounted on the wall of the Veterans Memorial alongside dozens of others. There are things about this next honor I'm not permitted to explain in detail, Webb says, voice carrying warm and steady across the square. National security has its limits, and I intend to respect every one of them. But some things don't need details to be understood. His eyes find Vivi in the crowd. Sacrifice looks the same whether or not you're allowed to talk about it. Courage doesn't require an audience to be real. And sometimes the quietest people in a room have already saved more lives than the rest of us will ever know. He gestures her forward. Vivi hesitates, feels every eye in the square turn toward her, the same vulnerable exposure she felt at that dinner table 3 weeks ago, except this time it doesn't feel like exposure at all. It feels like being seen. She steps forward, stands beside Webb as he unveils the plaque, fully her name, simple, unadorned. No rank listed, no unit specified. Just a single line beneath it that reads for service that cannot be named, and courage that speaks for itself. Applause rolls warm across the square. Somewhere in the crowd, Grant is crying openly, unashamed, clapping so hard his hands must ache. Marisol stands near the back, arms crossed, the smallest, proudest smile Vivi's ever seen crack across her weathered face. Ruth Ann has both hands pressed to her chest, mouthing something that might be there she is. That's my girl. That's Marianne's girl, though nobody's close enough to hear it clearly. And Holt. Holt stands at the very front, dress uniform pressed sharp. The same uniform he wore at Grant's dinner 3 weeks ago when he called his daughter not built for it in front of half the county. He steps forward now, in front of everyone. Doesn't wait for a microphone, doesn't wait for permission, just closes the distance between himself and his daughter with the particular urgency of a man who has run out of patience for waiting. He reaches into his jacket pocket, pulls out a small velvet box. Vivi's breath catches. She recognizes it instantly. Her mother's pendant. I kept this, Holt says, voice rough, thick with emotion he's stopped even trying to hide. After she died, told myself I was keeping it safe. The truth is, I was keeping it because I couldn't stand to look at it, because every time I did, I saw how much you were like her. Fearless, stubborn, willing to walk toward the fire instead of away from it. His hands shake slightly as he opens the box. I should have given this to you years ago. I'm giving it to you now, because you have more than earned the right to carry her with you, and because his voice finally breaks completely, because I am so unbelievably proud to be your father. Vivi takes the pendant from the box. Doesn't put it on herself. Instead, she reaches up, fastens it gently around her father's wrist instead, looping the delicate gold chain twice to make it fit. An unconventional bracelet on a soldier's scarred hand. Carry her with you too, she says, voice thick. We both loved her. We both lost her. Maybe it's time we both remembered her together instead of separately. Holt looks down at the pendant on his wrist, then up at his daughter, and for the first time in longer than either of them can remember, he pulls her into his arms. The whole town square erupts into applause around them, warm and thunderous. But neither one of them hears it. For a long moment, it's just the two of them. 30 years of silence finally, completely, breaking apart. Grant reaches them a moment later, wrapping both arms around the two of them at once. And for a moment the three of them just stand there together, holding on. The whole town watching a family put itself back together in real time, in public, with nothing left hidden. The cemetery sits on a quiet hill outside town, rows of white headstones catching the late afternoon light, the kind of ordinary American cemetery that exists in 1,000 small towns just like this one, unremarkable and sacred all at once. Vivi kneels at her mother's grave. Holt stands beside her. Grant a step behind, quiet, respectful, still absorbing the enormity of everything the last month has revealed about his sister, his father, the whole architecture of a family he thought he understood completely. The headstone reads simple. A name. 2 dates too close together. Beloved wife and mother. I used to come here alone, Holt admits quietly. For years. Never told either of you. Told myself I was protecting you from my grief. Truth is, I think I was protecting myself from having to share it with anyone. You don't have to protect us anymore, Dad. Vivi rests her hand flat against the cool granite. Not from grief. Not from anything. Holt kneels beside her, slow, his knees protesting the movement in the particular way an aging body does. And for a long moment, the three of them just sit there together in comfortable, hard-won silence. She used to say the two of you were made of the same stubborn cloth. Holt says, quiet, almost, to himself. I never understood how right she was until this month. She'd be proud of you, he says, finally quiet, looking at the headstone rather than at his daughter, like it's easier to say the truest things to a piece of granite than face to face. Both of you. She always said you two were going to do something extraordinary with your lives. I don't think even she imagined it would look quite like this. Grant laughs softly, wet-eyed. Understatement of the century. Vivi smiles despite everything, despite the weight of the last month, despite 3 years of silence finally, painfully, beautifully broken. She looks out over the hillside, over the quiet rows of headstones stretching toward the tree line, and feels something settle inside her chest that hasn't been settled in a very long time. Not because everything is fixed. It isn't. Grief doesn't work that way, and neither does 30 years of misunderstanding between a father and daughter. There will be hard days still. Awkward conversations. Old wounds that ache on the anniversaries that matter most. There will be nights, probably, when Holt still reaches instinctively for silence instead of honesty, old habits dying slower than either of them would like. There will be nights when Vivi still wakes reaching for a rifle that isn't there, old reflexes refusing to fully soften even in safety. But something has shifted permanently, irreversibly in the space this family occupies now. A door that stayed locked for 3 years has finally, fully swung open. Her phone buzzes softly in her pocket. She glances down. WBBB. When you're ready, not before I've got a consulting position that needs your eye. No pressure. The offer stands as long as you need it to. She looks up from the screen, out at the hillside, at her father's weathered hand resting gently over hers on the cool granite, at her brother, home safe, alive, understanding for the first time exactly what kind of woman his sister truly is. She doesn't answer Webb yet. There's time for that. There's time, finally, for a lot of things she spent 3 years believing she'd lost forever. For now, she just stays here, on this quiet hillside, between the people she fought hardest to protect and the mother whose memory taught her, long before any uniform ever did, exactly what it means to love somebody fiercely enough to sacrifice everything and never once regret it. The wind moves soft across the grass. Somewhere beyond the tree line, the sun begins its slow gold descent toward evening, painting the headstones in that particular amber light that seems to exist only in memory and in moments like this one, when a family finally, fully, comes home to itself. And for the first time in longer than she can remember, Vivienne Hargrove isn't bracing for the next blow. She's just breathing. Steady, unafraid. Finally, fully, home.